said for the past 3 or 4 minutes because the mic's on.
Who's here to represent the Harrises? Okay, state your name in the microphone there and your address.
My name is Mike Sanford. My name is Mike Sanford. I'm a land surveyor. My address is 4721 Atlantic Avenue.
4721.
Atlantic Avenue.
And what's your role in this, Mike?
I'm the land surveyor who prepared the exhibits for the land purchaser, which is Diamond Design Builders. They have a purchase agreement with the Harrises, and we did submit a copy of a portion of that with our application to show we have standing.
Okay. So someone's going to build a house on this lot, but it's not the Harrises.
That is correct.
Okay. And they have a signed sales agreement that states that.
That is correct.
And does the zoning office have a copy of that articles of agreement?
Yes, we provided it with our
Okay.
application.
All right. Okay, very good. All right, go ahead and proceed and tell us why you need this variance today.
If I may, I have a handout. I was going to provide it to you.
Come on up.
Thank you.
Next one.
So again, I mentioned I'm Mike Sanford of Sanford Surveying, here on behalf of the applicant Diamond Design Builders. I am joined by Mike Koloshenko here from Diamond Design. We would like to present information of the requested variance on the north side of South Shore Drive between Pittsburgh and Colorado. The parcel is vacant land. It's currently zoned R1 and it's tax parcel 4138-104. Diamond Design Builders is a custom builder in Erie, and they would like to construct a single-family home on this property. In discussions that I had with the zoning officer, we were informed that a variance is required regarding the front yard setback that Jake mentioned, section 205.11. Because based on the wording of the City of Erie zoning ordinance, the front yard setback is established by existing structures like Jake mentioned, but that's actually the required setback. It's an interesting wording that the existing structures set the required setback plus or minus 5 feet. It's not a minimum. Other townships use it as a minimum, but your city requires as a requirement. So in other words, this proposed residence would have to be constructed, unless the variance is granted, at the same setback established by other homes in the block. So based on the information we're going to present here, or I'm going to present here, that's not possible for this subject property, and that's why we feel a variance is required. We certainly understand, I understand, that both a zoning permit's required and a building permit's required at some point for this new residence, but the variance is required before we go to that step. We also know that this property is subject to a bluff recession ordinance. We have a copy of that, and we would be in compliance with that. But we're here today about a front yard setback variance, and it's needed because of an old ravine on the parcel. And this old ravine presents unique hardship. The ravine's location shows up on a series of maps which I handed to you. I did put in my application, but I just provided them again, just so we'll go through those and just show those to you. On the first exhibit, which is from 1926, in your package there, that's the recorded Tracy Place subdivision, and it shows the old ravine, the top of bank lines. You can see them on the drawing, and they cross diagonally through this parcel. So that shows that the ravine was there certainly since 1926 and likely before. If you flip to the next exhibit, that's something I put together from a USGS map from 1957. Again, just further documenting the ravine was still there in 1957 because it's shown on by the contours there crossing diagonally through this same property. On the next exhibit, which is an aerial topo survey from 1973, same thing. It shows there still was a ravine there, still in the same place, passing through this property. Now, sometime after 1973, the ravine got filled in because it's no longer visible, and I don't have access to any aerial topo between 1973 and today. I mean, the ravine's been filled in. So we know sometime after 73 it was filled in. But by comparing the contours, you can figure out that the ravine fill is upwards of 40 feet deep on this lot. It gets deeper as it goes west, but on this lot it's upwards of 40 foot of fill. The fill's comprised of a whole bunch of variety of materials: concrete, asphalt, bricks, lumber, dirt. It's basically everything. And the fill is loose to medium. It's characterized as loose to medium. It's not like it was compacted in place, per se. So, as you folks know, you're the zoning hearing board. You're authorized by your ordinance to hear requests for variances. If the zoning ordinance inflicts hardship on the property or the applicant, and you can grant a variance if you find that the findings are relevant in this case. So, I know this is a hearing, and just because it's a hearing and we have to put it in the record, I was just going to go through the 5 criteria that your ordinance requires and how we comply with that. The first requirement is that there's unique physical conditions peculiar to this property, and that hardship is due to those conditions. So as I mentioned, and as on the exhibits, this subject property is traversed by an old deep ravine. It presents both a physical condition and also exceptional topography condition. So, and it is unique to this property. So, if you look closely at that first map that I provided you, the 1926 subdivision, where they show the ravine, they also show the 150-foot front yard setback. It's interesting to note that the 150-foot setback, where you're supposed to build, is completely within the ravine, as shown on that map. So it's not possible. I just wanted you to see that's the way it was drawn. The next criteria of a variance is that because of these physical conditions, there's no possibility the property can be developed in strict conformity with your ordinance, and that a variance is necessary to enable reasonable use of the property. As I mentioned in my initial words when I spoke to the zoning officer, the way the ordinance is written, it requires the new residence to be built at the setback or plus or minus 5 feet of the homes. And because of the ravine, because of the depth of the fill, because of the compaction, it's not suitable material on which to safely build a house with a typical foundation system. So the next criteria is that the unnecessary hardship has not been caused by the applicant. Well, the ravine is a natural formation. It's been there 100 years or more. The applicant, Diamond Design, did not place the ravine fill. Therefore, he did not cause the hardship. Next is that the variance, if authorized, would not alter the essential character of the neighborhood or substantially impair use of adjacent property or detrimental to public welfare. So this is an existing residential neighborhood. The applicant seeks to build a residence. He's a custom builder. I mean, the houses down there on the north side of the road are wonderful. They're just beautiful. But if you look at the houses that Diamond Design builds, they're impeccable. So it really would not alter. It's going to be a beautiful residence in a beautiful neighborhood. Prior to today's meeting, Mike Koloshenko did contact both of the closest neighbors, and he talked to them personally about his variance request. To the east of the subject property, he met with Dr. David Paulo and his wife. To the west of the property, he met with Dr. Jeffrey Blake. And just it's just interesting to me that Dr. Blake's house is actually in Mill Creek. He is the closest neighbor to the west, and I know he's here today, but technically his house is in Mill Creek. But Michael did go, we talked about his application, and I suggested that he go speak to the two closest neighbors. I always feel that that's appropriate, and he did do that. And then lastly, the variance, if authorized, would represent the minimum variance to afford relief. So Diamond Design is requesting relief from section 20511 so that the residence need not be constructed at the required front yard setback plus or minus 5 feet. The requested variance is so that the proposed residence may be situated the minimum safe distance from the ravine's north bank. So basically, to summarize, the proposed residence would have to be built further north, further back, because of this ravine. But we understand we need to present the minimum variance to afford relief. So we're not asking to go all the way back to the bluff. That's not what we're asking for. We're asking to build the south side of the new home would be as close to the ravine as safely could be constructed. And that's would be the minimum relief, if you will. So that's our presentation. I did bring a larger drawing here. It's really the same drawing that was in my application. It just is zoomed out a little bit. I know the folks in the audience can't see it. I can turn it around if you'd like so they can see it. They can come up and see it, but I just zoomed out the neighborhood a little bit. I didn't know what questions there would be from the folks. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
BJ, Laura, Ed?
Yes. So, are you requesting 30 feet?
We're not requesting a finite number because the ravine crosses the lot at a diagonal line. He's a custom builder. The house will not likely be purely rectangular. It's going to have, bumps, ins and outs. What the zoning officer and I talked about is that we would, when we submit a plot plan to him, part of the zoning permit, we would be responsible to show where the shape of the new home, where the new home is in relation to the old ravine. What I can commit to you is it's going to be as close to that north ravine line as shown in that 1926 map as possible. I think, now what's reasonable, what's a minimum safe distance? Again, the ravine's been filled in, so you don't really know exactly where it is. We know close. Do I think building the new home 0 feet from the new ravine, old ravine, is appropriate? No. 10 feet? I think so. So I think, I can't give you a finite number. It's not like that. But when I submit, if it's approved, and I submit a plot plan to Jake in his office for zoning permit, I would fully expect his office to make me show the old ravine and provide a dimension from it. And I think if we were 10 feet or 10 feet from that, I think is appropriate. I think that's the minimum.
Jake, are you familiar with the situation, the ravine and so forth? I'll talk.
I'm sorry, Richard.
Are you familiar with the ravine in its location?
No, I've been on the site and, I've seen that area has loose fill in it, but I'm not familiar with the historic nature of the property.
And are you required in your office to know where the boundary would be? Are you requesting that you know that boundary of how far the setback is?
I think for the purposes of the variance, if approved, the plot plan, we would want to know that so that it's, the proposed development is in keeping with the intent of the variance request.
So we don't actually know what we're asking of to how far the setback is then?
I guess
I'm asking the office.
Go ahead.
You officially don't know how far the setback will be, but you will know it in accordance with filing a plot plan.
Correct.
Thank you.
Laura?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Sanford, for your testimony.
A little louder.
Sorry. Perhaps this is a question for you or perhaps the other Mike. If we don't grant the variance today, what would be your next step, if there is any?
Well, Diamond Design wants to build a home, but they're not permitted to do so without a variance. It's a non-starter with the zoning office. So we need the variance. If the variance isn't granted, Mr. Welch's office will not be able to issue a zoning permit. He will not be able to build a home. He won't buy the property.
Okay.
It's just, what'll happen, he cannot build a home. So it's quite simple as that, yeah.
Let me ask you this question. How large of a house, square footage wise, is this home proposed to be?
Similar to the neighbors, probably.
You have to stand up, come up to the mic, give her your name. Do you see the spelling of this name?
No, yeah, I need
Yeah,
it.
okay. You are
Mikhail Kolesnichenko with Diamond Design Builders,
address,
2503 Peach Street.
25 what?
2503 Peach Street.
All right, so you want to tell me about the square footage of this, what is proposed for this house?
I guess we're just gonna build something similar to the neighbor's house. I mean, similar square footage, around like maybe 4,000 square foot, I assume.
You think those houses that run along South Shore Drive are only 4,000 square feet on an average?
I'm not sure exactly how many square foot, but I mean, we're gonna figure out, and I guess we're gonna,
I would think that they're bigger, but
oh, could be bigger, I'm not sure.
PJ, any questions?
Yeah, I have one. So the property, can everybody hear me? Just make sure.
Yeah.
So the property that we're looking at here, the old ravine runs through the entirety of the property, correct? At a diagonal slant or at a slant? So
Correct.
I'm thinking about access. I would assume that you would run a driveway off of South Shore Drive to the home. I mean, what's the stability of that, I guess, as you, I mean, is it going to be able to be accessed based on how deep you can go? I mean, I guess that's the concern that I have, is I wonder how deep that is, or, you know, could it fall or whatever it might be at some point.
Sure, I can answer that. I've been to the property a couple, 3 times. On the east side of the empty lot, there you see no evidence, no depression at all of a ravine. It's essentially flat. As a surveyor, I would certainly expect his driveway would be on the easterly side. That to me makes total sense. On the westerly side of this lot, the old ravine is somewhat visible. I mean by that is it's depressed elevational-wise 8 feet-ish, something in that range. And I think that's just a virtue of part of the ravine was filled in by one property owner, and there's a property line, you can't cross it. And I think the ravine on Mr. Blake's property was filled in later, and again, the property line, you can't fill it, so I think there's just naturally, that's why there's a hole there. That's my suspicion. But again, I would expect the proposed driveway would be on the east side of the lot. There is no settlement that we see there. If that did settle, now the ravine's infinitely shallower on that east side, because as it went west, it got deeper and deeper very quickly because it's a sandy material. So again, the driveway on the east side would be on less fill. And I don't mean to say it this way, but it's a driveway. And if it was concrete, if it was asphalt, and it had settlement, it could always be filled. It's not a home, but the driveway, you know, they could take out a couple of feet and put in some more material to try and bridge that maybe. Again, less fill. So I don't see that as I understand your question. I don't know that that's, the driveway being over is not a concern to me as a surveyor, because it's just a driveway.
Thank you.
Laura,
Take
anything
one
else?
more. Mr. Koloshenko? You mentioned, or Mr. Sanford mentioned, you had conversations with the neighbors. Were you able to address their concerns, if they had any?
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. The conversations that you had with neighbors on both sides of the parcel, did the neighbors have any concerns, and were you able to address them?
Just the neighbor on the left side, he mentioned about some concerns, yeah.
Okay.
When you say the neighbors to the left, what's that name?
Uh,
That Blake's?
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay.
Anything else, Larry? BJ, anything? Yeah, go ahead. Becky, is there anybody else to speak in favor of this variance? Is there anyone else to speak in favor of this variance? Is there anybody here that wants to speak in favor of this variance? Is there anyone here that objects to the variance? Okay, all right. Mr. Mailer, you're going to be the spokesman for the group, or you just represent Blake's, or?
So if I might, Mr. Johnson, Dr. Blake has some personal comments that he'd like to share with the board. I believe Mrs. Powell may have some comments as well, and I have a few brief summarizing I'd like to make at the end, if that's possible.
Okay. A question that I have before you even start. To the Blakes, how long have you owned your house in South Shore Drive?
36 years.
Was there a ravine there when you bought your house?
There was.
And did Harris's,
There was a ravine, but on the property.
say that again? Come on, I can't
Yeah, before we need, yes, procedurally, let's have him, who are we talking to here?
The ravine is extensive.
You're Jeff, you're
I'm
Dr.
Jeffrey Blake.
You're Dr. Jeff Blake.
Correct.
And your address is?
2216 South Shore Drive.
Thank you.
Is that east or west of this property?
We are west of the property in question, and in regard to your question of a ravine, it was filled in more to the east, and that there is a depression within that lot, which represents what remains of what was not filled in where the ravine had been.
Does this ravine, or did it also run through your property?
Yes, it does. And
Did
if I can address, I have some comments to make, maybe it'll answer some of your questions, and then we can go from that point, if that would be
Right.
okay. All right. Actually, I'm also here with my wife, Carol Blake, and I really do want to thank you for the opportunity to address the Erie Zoning Board concerning the question of a dimensional variance on the property in the 2100 block of South Shore Drive. Diamond Design Builders are requesting a variance on the front yard setback and claim the zoning ordinance inflicts an unnecessary hardship upon the construction of the new home, as we've heard. We contend that the claimed hardship does not exist to the extent which would warrant a variance that would compromise the standards set by the neighborhood plan and significantly alter the character of the neighborhood and the positive aesthetic qualities that presently exist on the western end of South Shore Drive. The parcel, excuse me, the parcel of land in which the Diamond Design Builders wish to build the home is very problematic in many ways. The problems include a major storm sewer that drains a large area of northwest Erie and northeast Mill Creek, which crosses the front part of the lot. There's also a ravine, as we mentioned, in the middle section, which has been partially filled. And a section of land overlooking the bay, which has very questionable stability. At present, Diamond Design Builders plan to build a home at a minimum distance of 50 foot from the bluff line of the bay. Now, we have lived in our present home for 36 years. We have a strong personal history with the problems associated with erosion along the bayfront. We had a major issue with the stabilization of our bank and have invested large sums of money and time. And I will not bore you with the many details. But in summary, we worked with a geologist whose expertise was the lake and bay shoreline, the Army Corps of Engineers, the coastal zone management, and the Department of Environmental Protection, among others. The experience that we had exposed us to the problems of erosion, which involve clay, shale, the flow of groundwater, the angle of repose in this location of the bay. Excuse me. It's kind of hard talking with this mask. The main takeaway from all this is that the bank on the bay is not stable. It is continuously eroding, and it is imperative not to place any heavy objects or heavy weights anywhere near the crest of the bluff. It was strongly advised of us by all these experts that we prevent adding any additional weight within a 100-foot distance from the crest of the bank. As you all know, the front yard line standard is a variance of plus or minus 5 feet. The variance presently requested will be at least 125 feet from the existing front line standard. This is really extreme. Consider as an example, and hopefully a visual for you, that the back of our home would be approximately 125 foot from the back of this intended home. This is completely out of line with the rest of the backyards along the bay, along South Shore Drive. But I must say, building this house on the bluff would certainly command a very grandiose view of the bay. Although the front yard uniformity is important, if you surveyed the residents of South Shore neighborhood on the bay, the most important aesthetic of the property is their backyard. The building of a home on the crest of the bay would significantly alter the established norm. Now, our main argument here, however, the main point, what I think needs to be emphasized, is against the claim that the zoning ordinance inflicts a non-necessary hardship upon the applicant. The fact is, I feel, and many other people feel, that the home can be built within the usual parameters dictated by the neighborhood zoning ordinance. The house can be built where it should be built. The second statement made by the applicants that the proposed building will not alter the character of the neighborhood is unquestionably incorrect. The major changes to the aesthetics on the north side of these homes, in the backyards overlooking the bay, positively is an alteration of the neighborhood. In addition, there are some other factors that are of concern in the development of this difficult parcel of land. The surface of this lot is almost entirely lower than the adjacent properties. We have been told by the president of DDC, or the contractor, that in order to bring the lot up to level, it's proposed that it'll take approximately 250 triaxle truckloads of fill. The weight of one triaxle truck with fill weighs approximately 77,000 pounds. Most likely the fill will have to come from outside the city borders, and the trucks will have to travel significant distances both ways, causing wear and tear on the streets, neighborhoods, and people's nerves. Another significant consideration is a storm sewer that crosses in front of the property. This storm sewer pipe is 48 inches tall, or 4 foot, and is made of concrete. It drains, as I said earlier, a very large area of northwestern Erie and northeastern Mill Creek. Think about 500 triaxle trucks trips across the underground pipe with these extremely heavy vehicles and the possibility of damaging this 70-plus-year-old concrete sewer pipe. That would amount to approximately 30 million pounds traveling back and forth off the storm pipe. Add a good rainstorm, and you have many flooded streets and basements. Not to mention the possibility of a large sinkhole. One last point, maybe it has nothing to do with variance, but the area along the bay is a home to a great deal of wildlife. And in particular, over the last few years, we have seen an increase in bald eagle activity. We see at least 2 eagles soaring every day, and we believe there is a nest, a roosting area of these magnificent birds somewhere on the property being discussed. In conclusion, really the major point here to be made is that I feel there is no hardship with building within the zoning ordinance. And secondly, the proposed location of the building on the bluff will alter the character of the neighborhood. So I'd like to thank you for your consideration of the arguments proposed against the granting of this dimensional variance. I appreciate this is all part of the public record, and I am able to participate in this discussion. I would encourage you to visit the site or somebody and speak to people knowledgeable and who are experts on the bluff in waterfront properties. If indeed the house is built on this property, I feel it is imperative that the house be located in a manner that is consistent with the long-standing South Shore neighborhood standards. Thank you. If I can answer any of your questions.
Is there anyone else to speak in objection to this variance?
I have several questions for him.
Pardon?
I have several questions for him.
Oh, hold on, Doug. Ed wants to ask you some questions. Maybe the other board
All right.
members do too.
I want to go down a list of things that you listed and see if we're on the same page. First of all, you listed that the Army Corps of Engineers made a recommendation. Do you have that?
You know, this was done, I don't, this was done approximately 25 years ago. They were involved, and they looked at, and we had our geologist, and we had many of the people, and basically we had a plan on how to mitigate the damage that was being done on our bank, and they basically okayed it. So I don't think we have any actual record per se of their, what they did, but they were on the site, and they.
Well, you answered first. Jake, are you familiar with any study by the Army Corps of Engineers?
No.
Secondly, you mentioned that there's a storm sewer, located on the property
Yes.
to be built. Jake, are you familiar with the storm sewer?
Just as it's depicted on the map.
The storm sewer.
Correct.
Could you show or someone point that out to me? There's a storm sewer on the map?
You want to bring that big drawing up, Jake?
I have.
Not talking about the ravine, I'm actually talking about the storm sewer. Going through the middle. Okay, thank you.
I got it.
Jake, do we have buildings in the city of Erie built on storm sewers currently? And are there any problems associated with it?
Thanks.
Really not equipped to answer that question.
Thank you. When you were familiar with it, it was a storm sewer there. Did you find out from the city how they go about building on places where they have storm sewers?
I'm not sure. I'm having difficulty hearing.
Did you look and see if there were other buildings built on storm sewers in the city of Erie?
Well, that storm sewer crosses our property as well.
Right.
And as I said, when we mitigated the problem, the storm sewer stopped prior to our property, and we basically extended it through our property to the next property.
And that's what I was interested in. How did you mitigate the problem?
We mitigated it with, first of all, extending the storm sewer. Then there's a lot of water that pipes about 15, 20 foot down on the surface. And they put, I don't know what the term would be, but gravel and so forth up the slope, so that water would follow the stone. And then we put fill over the top of that.
Okay.
That, in short, is what was done.
You mentioned about the 250 trucks.
Yes.
Is that your guesstimate? Are you, I know you're a doctor, but are you a
that is-
specialist in this area?
I'm sorry.
I know you're a doctor, but are you a specialist in this area of how many
No, I'm not.
truckloads?
I relied on the information given to me by the contractor, who said that was his intent.
Do you have a document from the contractor?
No.
Okay. You believe the house to be built 125 feet back from the,
I don't think it should be.
no, I'm asking a question. When I asked how far would the house be, you seemingly knew that the house would have to be built
Right.
125 feet from the main street?
Right. If you look at where the present line is, where all the existing houses exist,
Mm-hmm.
and you look where the bluff is, the ravine in between, and you look at the bluff, and you take 50 feet away from the bluff, they say they're going to, a minimum of 50 feet from the bluff, that's about 100, that would be about 125 foot. Or more, actually, if you figure the width of the house.
Thank you.
Anything else? Laura, PJ, any questions? We had a hand up in the back that wanted to, and there was a second hand. Yeah, okay.
I need to be sworn in now.
Are you sworn in?
No, she said she.
Okay. Come on forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Your name and address?
My name is Sharon Paulo, and I reside at 2166 South Shore Drive. I'm the property adjacent and east to the property in discussion. I want to thank you for your time today and attention to this matter and service to our city. Even though there's only 2 residents here present today, I hope that the issues that we bring up are not to be taken lightly. Having said that, first and foremost, I do not have a problem with the property being sold. I do not have a problem with an appropriate home being built that conforms to the zoning regulations of the street. However, I do have some concerns. There are presence of eagles. I have seen evidence of dead fish, squirrel tails, rabbit foots, things that eagles normally would prey on in our backyard. On almost a daily basis, I do see eagles flying by. So I would recommend that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service look into this before anything is approved. I have a problem with the structure closer to the bluff. I think this would give the homeowner an unfair advantage of the view of the Presque Isle Bay versus the other homeowners of the street. And as you know, the street has a history of long-term residents, and I think who pay a significant amount in taxes, and I think that would be an unfair advantage to them as well. My privacy would be impacted. This could affect the value of my home, and I'm not sure of the stability of the bluff. Adding all the weight of the machinery and home, plus digging, vibrations, etc., could adversely affect the bluff. Since I'm adjacent to the property, my land could adversely be affected and lessen the value of my property. So I do recommend that the Coastal Zone Management be contacted for an analysis. And I'm not a builder, but I do find it difficult to believe that there could not be other alternatives to bypass the issues presented by the prospective buyer. Personally, I have walked the ravine when a dog got loose, and I haven't seen any evidence of asphalt, concrete, bricks. All I see is just trees and plants. In conclusion, clearly there's many issues to consider. I ask that you allow the time to study these issues before checking the box for approval, and I thank you for your time.
Question for you. How long have you lived in your home?
9 years.
9?
Yes.
Any questions for Paulo? DJ, Laura?
No.
Ed?
Have you had any problems with deterioration of your land in the back of your home?
Not that I'm aware of. But if you look at the topographical maps, they are dated, from 1973, so there's not a recent one done. So there could have been.
So, but in 9 years of living there, you've not had to do
No.
retrofit or anything to the topography of the land to change it?
No.
Do you have any issues with water ponding on your property?
I'm sorry?
Do you have any issues with water ponding on your property during an incident of a storm?
No.
No. Okay.
Anything else? Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Blake, one question for you. You've lived there 36 years. You say, was this land filled, this ravine filled in before you bought your home or after you bought your home?
On the property we were discussing?
What's that?
On the property we were discussing?
Yes.
Yes, it was filled in.
It was filled in before you,
There is still somewhat of a depression, probably 8 or 10 foot deep.
thank you.
He said while he was living there. Is that what you're saying? Okay.
Good afternoon. I need to be sworn in.
Raise your right hand and be sworn. Do you swear or affirm the testimony to give the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Name and address, please.
Kathy Schaff, 2437 East 43rd Street. I am a city council person, and I am privy to some knowledge that Jake may not know because he is not on the meetings, but I was just at a meeting with Zoom this morning, and you asked the question about sewer problems and housing. I am the liaison for the water, and I have been attending mayor briefing meetings that Jake is not on, but I am on to represent council. And right now there is a infrastructure problem with sewers at Garrison Run location at Frontier Lumber that is being worked on because of a storm that happened previously. But then we had another storm, it was about a week and a half ago, I was on vacation, that also hit the Garrison Run, where a house was living on top of it, and we had to place the people in temporary housing while it's being fixed right now. I do know from meetings on council that our infrastructure with sewer and water are antiquated and are in need of repair. Thank you.
Just clarify for a second that Frontier Lumber is not in the area of this property. You're talking
Correct, but you had asked about...
No, it's just because there's a Frontier Association
Right.
here where they're at. I want to
Right. I am not for this or against this. You just brought up a sewer issue, which...
Yes.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Questions? Yep. Mr. Mailer, you're in objection to this dimensional variance?
I do, Mr. Johnson, thank you. So if I might, I think it might be worthwhile for the board, if I might, can I borrow this? I just want to try to help folks get...
Mr. Chairman, I believe the gentleman needs to state his name and address for the record, please.
I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the reminder. My name, oh, now you can't see me. I need to be taller, Jeff. That's what I need to be. My name is John Mailer. I'm with the law firm of McDonald, Illig, Jones, and Britton, and I'm here on behalf of the neighbors on either side of the property we're looking at. I wanted to give you the benefit of that map which Mr. Sanford's office prepared. You'll see that Dr. and Mrs. Blake live to the west. Here's their home. The Blakes also own property in the city. Mr. Sanford mentioned that they live in Mill Creek. Here's the dividing line between Mill Creek and the city. So the Blakes' home is in Mill Creek, but they also own this lot, which is the subject of litigation to which the doctor referred, and it's in the city here. So he's also a city property owner. Dr. and Ms. Paula live in this property here to the east of the subject property. So, just wanted to orient you. So if I might respond to a couple other things that were said, just to sort of clear the air. I'm going to move that in because I can't see you. We think the record is a little incomplete in a couple of ways. It's already been hit on a little bit, but first of all, we don't have an agreement of sale that's been submitted as part of this application. What we have instead is an addendum that extends the date beyond today's date. We have no idea what the term of that contract is, and we believe that it should have been submitted as part of the application. And without that, there's a question about why we're here to begin with.
Well, let me interrupt for a second. Jake, we have this second modification standard agreement for the sale of vacant land. You have this attached to our packet, correct?
Correct. That was submitted with the application.
And
so all that, I'm sorry to interrupt, Jeff, all that does is extend the date. It doesn't offer us any of...
And I'd asked if there was articles of agreement in your office. Is there, Jake? Jake?
I'm sorry?
Do we have the articles of agreement for the sale of this real estate in the zoning office?
All I have is what was attached to the application.
So you just have the second modification of standard agreement for the sale of vacant land, correct? That's all the city has? That's all we have.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you. So I really just want to summarize and make a little more technical points, if I may. We're speaking now in opposition to the variance request. As has been pointed out, variance isn't necessary. There's plenty of space on the lot to build at the 150-foot line. The alternative that's been proposed may be more attractive for the contractor, but it certainly isn't necessary, and we think the ask for a variance is just inappropriate. We think that the storm sewer, and it's been alluded to, that's shown on the drawing, could possibly be relocated. The ravine could also be excavated and refilled. Finally, by way of an alternative, because we think the property can be built on as it presently sits, at the current building line, but as an alternative, it could also be built on pilings. So to relocate or downsize the structure to fit within a safe space, we believe is achievable without variance. Now, when we look at the request for a variance itself, we believe that there's some important points they can't meet. They need to show that the change will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. As has been testified, that's simply not the case. It's a fundamental change. This setback was established almost 100 years ago when the Tracy subdivision map went on record, and that's in your packet. In addition to the Tracy subdivision 150-foot line, there's also the city ordinance, which requires that houses be built within 5 feet of the average distance from the road, the house on either side. And again, as you can see from the map that's in front of you, to put the house way back near the bluff, and I'm going to get to the location of the house here in a minute, it would substantially and permanently alter the essential character of the neighborhood. We also believe it would be detrimental to grant this variance to the public welfare. It would adversely affect the integrity of the bank. It would deprive adjoining property owners of open space, views, etc., and it would alter permanently the look of the neighborhood. This is overlooking the bay in Lake Erie, our jewel, our prize, and it would change the neighborhood, not just for the neighbors, but also for the community as a whole. Now, I grew up in this neighborhood, and this property, for some of you who may know Northwest Erie, or Northwest Erie, Northeast Mill Creek, this is an area known as Devil's Backbone. This is where the kids hung out. Not all wholesome activity took place, other things took place there too. But it's been an open area for many, many years. And it just isn't so that every piece of property in the city needs to be developed and built upon. We also think, and this is a very important point, and some of the board members have hit on this, you've heard everyone say they don't really know what, they can't tell you how big the variance is that they want. They're asking you to give them a blank check. It's not appropriate. In fact, I think that you legally don't have the authority to say, go ahead and build it wherever it feels right. We think part of the submission should have been a plot plan that shows you exactly where they're going to put it. We don't know. Is it 125 feet? The application itself, I think, is a little misleading. It says they want more than a 5% differential, or 5 feet, excuse me. Is it 5 feet? Is it 125 feet? We don't know. I don't think that the board has the power to grant or to give anybody a blank check. It's a very essential piece. What is the variance they're asking for? We don't know. They don't seem to know. There's also, one of the elements is that we can't do anything, the board can't do anything against the public welfare. There's a whole bunch of issues here. It's been alluded to. I just want to highlight some of them. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has jurisdiction. The U.S. Coastal Zone Management has jurisdiction. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Commission has jurisdiction. So does the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. We haven't heard about any of those things and what the contractor would do to get the approvals that are necessary. Those things measure public welfare. Without those approvals, without those consents, it should be a non-starter. A variance of this magnitude, or potentially this magnitude, simply isn't appropriate without more precision in the ask, without more detail about what's going to be done to protect against these very real, which our clients, my clients have experienced, negative consequences to the shoreline. This is a very sensitive area. It's experienced major loss in the past, and we don't want to see it happen again. So, you know, simply stated, the ask is a bridge too far. We have a restriction that's over 100 years old that has been uniformly followed by all the houses up and down South Shore, and the applicant has not made, we believe, a case, an appropriate case for a deviation from that rule. We don't think a variance is even necessary. Some other things which may or may not be directly relevant, but you need to be aware of. You know, we're concerned about wildlife. We're concerned about eagles and other things. We're concerned about the integrity of the bank, the shoreline of the bay. But, and it's been alluded to, you know, there's a case that was reported in a newspaper not too long ago where the Griffiths successfully sued Mill Creek Township because of some stormwater issues. It was also property located on the bluff. We think there's a real issue here with so many questions being unanswered to permit this sort of a project to move forward without more answers. So for all these reasons, we would respectfully ask you to deny the application for a variance. And again, I thank you for your time. Happy to try to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for Attorney Mailer? Thank you.
I have copies of
I have one, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry.
If I may. Jake, perhaps you could answer this question if Mr. Mailer doesn't have the information. You've cited a number of times that Army Corps has jurisdiction, Coastal Zone Management has jurisdiction, U.S. Fish and Wildlife has jurisdiction. Are there any deed restrictions in that regard? Okay, so how do we... My question to you then is, in reference to jurisdiction, documentation of that. I mean, we had asked Dr. Blake relative to having copies of that guidance.
So on your point about the subdivision restriction, I believe in the packet that Mr. Sanford gave you, there is a map from the 1926 subdivision of Tracy subdivision. Yes. And I believe what you'll find on there is a 150-foot building line. Mm-hmm. It doesn't say minimum building line, it says building line. That means the house has to be built to that line. So that was established as a private matter when Tracy subdivision was established in 1926. So that's the deed restriction, if you will, that applies to this property. In addition to that, the city has an ordinance from which this 5-foot deviation rule comes from. And what it says, in essence, is when you're going to build a house, it has to be the average distance from the street as the house on either side to again, establish uniformity. And that's the variance from which the applicant seeks relief.
Yes, I'm aware.
Yeah. On the Army Corps of Engineers, this is litigation that the Blakes were involved in to preserve and maintain the integrity of the bank on their side of the city and Mill Creek line. We can certainly endeavor to pull out those records to the extent that they still exist and get it to you, if that's what you're asking for. Be happy to try to do that.
Anything else, Mike?
No.
BJ?
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Yeah.
I just had a question for you, Attorney Mayor. Are you familiar with the landfill?
At this site?
Yes.
Well, I'm not sure what I know what you mean by familiar. When I was a young boy, 14, 15, we used to run around on this property. That would have been around about 72 or 73, maybe the mid 70s, but I haven't been on the property for many years.
Thank you.
Anything else? Is there anybody else to object to this variance? Is there anybody else to object to this variance? Is there anybody else to object to this variance?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for the builder.
The builder?
Yes.
Or the surveyor?
Surveyor.
Okay.
How did you determine what was underneath from 13 to 40 feet? How did you determine that?
Mr. Koloshenko hired a boring company, and they came and they drilled 2 borings in the old ravine, and they documented the material that was found and depth of material.
Okay. So should Mr. Shenko be speaking then? Because the document doesn't exist here. Do you have that document?
We have we didn't submit it because I put the results in the, in our application, in the application.
Let me speak to this again. Your opposition says that you could safely build. Do you have a document that says you can't safely build because you have borings or something of the effect that says that?
I don't have it with me, no. And he.
But you're
You have one, though.
you're here before the hearing now, so you need all your documentation.
I understand.
Okay.
But if I could address, may I address a few
Sure.
things? Okay. It's interesting, Mr. Mailer brought up the Griffiths residence, which really is not germane here, but it's interesting because they did have an erosion issue. It was because of a storm sewer that leaked and caused massive erosion in a ravine. That's why we don't want to build on the ravine. It's not proper. That's why we're requesting that's why I say shouldn't safely be built on the ravine, because ravines are unconsolidated material. And that's why moving the home to the north makes sense to me. And if I could also, a couple other things. Mr. Mailer said that my exhibit showed, and it did, that there's a 150-foot setback for the Tracy Acres subdivision. But if you look at the aerial image I provided you, in the large one or the small one, it shows that the Blake's residence actually is built about 30 feet south of that building line. They did not honor the 150-foot building line with the construction of their home. Now, they're in Mill Creek, again, I understand that, but it is a subdivision building line. So Mr. Mailer to say that's, been there 100 years and set the precedent of which they didn't follow. So I'm just saying their home is situated further south than it should be per the setback line. So that exacerbates when Mr. Blake was talking about the distance from the back of his home to this new home. The fact their home is moved further south exacerbates the difference between these two homes. So I just wanted to let you know that that's an interesting observation. As far as coastal zone goes, I could have Michael come up and explain, but maybe he wants to, but he did meet, her name is Shelby Clark. She is the overseer of coastal zone in our community. And he did meet her at the property, and they walked the bluff. So he can speak to that. And then your ordinance has a requirement that you cannot build any principal structure within 25 feet of the bluff. That's because it's protected by the Presque Isle. This is in the bay. It doesn't experience the erosion that the lake waters impose on other portions of the bluff in our county. Mr. Blake indicated that, which I've never said, that the intention is to build this new home 50 feet away from the bluff. I never said that. That is not never anything I said. I said the minimum is 25, and we certainly don't want to be anywhere close to the minimum. No, nowhere close. And Mr. Mailer said we didn't provide a finite number, and I explained that during my testimony that I agreed with that. But what I did say was we planned on putting the south edge of the new home 10 feet away from the old ravine. That's what I said, and that's what I stick to. We do have on our drawings where the old ravine was illustrated to be. Mr. Koloshenko took a backhoe out to the property and excavated 3 holes north of where he felt the old ravine was, and he found virgin material because it was all a sandy material, which is very common for that area. So he knew he was in virgin material north of where the old ravine was suspected to be. Now, the onus is on him. He will have to, when he submits a plot plan to Jake's office, he will have to go out with a backhoe again and further define. He'll have to pothole the site back and forth, looking for where the old ravine is, what is filled, what is virgin. And then the onus is on him to plot that line and put his new structure within 10 feet of that line. So we did provide a dimension. We're 10 feet from the old ravine, and the old ravine is illustrated on those drawings. So I feel we did provide a dimension. And Mr. Dawson asked, you know, if it was 30 feet. That, again, I can't word it that way. I word it a different way. We're within 10 feet of the old ravine.
Any other questions? Nobody else can speak in objection to this variance? Laura, Jake.
I just want to submit the comments in writing if I could.
I just had a quick question for Mr. Mailer while he's distributing there. Mr. Mailer, you said you represented the neighborhood.
I represent Dr. and Mrs. Blake.
So not the neighborhood.
No, just the Blakes.
Thank you very much.
We have the ability to cognizance
Oh, geez.
on the side if we want to, or are you comfortable with voting as we stand here now?
I'd like to have a discussion.
You'd like to talk about it? Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Here's a, Jeff. You go ahead. No, thank you.
I'm good.
Yeah, were you sworn in?
I'm good.
Mrs. Blake? I don't think you were.
Yeah, she is.
You do. Janet, you want to swear in Mrs. Blake?
You swear or affirm the testimony will give the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do. I'd like to clarify a couple of the comments made by Mr. Sanford. First of all, there is a 15-foot setback on our house that was granted at the time that Sumner Nichols built it in 1950. Because of the way the backyard was shaped, they had to get that 15-foot variance to protect their backyard. The other thing is, this project, it wasn't from, the difficulty that we experienced was not from a leaking sewer. It was from no sewer. The sewer line stopped. Erie and Mill Creek were running storm and sewage across our property with no easement. We paid to extend the sewer. So he's totally incorrect about that. Not factual. That's
Thank
it.
you. We're going to caucus for a short time. We'll be back. Okay, at this time, we're going to resume the meeting. Is there a motion from one of the members regarding this situation?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to table this discussion for this month's meeting and ask the applicant to submit additional information relative to where the building will be positioned. Provide them the opportunity to do that, if they so choose.
Jake, you want to take a
I
roll
would,
call?
Mr. Chairman, that's a motion. I'd like to second that motion.
Thank you. Jake, you want to take a roll call? Want to vote?
Mr. Dawson, how do you vote?
Yes to the motion?
Ms. Country?
Yes.
Mr. Mello?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
A 4-0 vote to, on the motion to table, and continue the hearing until next month.
Thank you. Meeting is adjourned.